Today on Locked On Red Wings, should Detroit sign Adin Hill or Laurent Brossoit?
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a podcast producer for the Daily JAWWJ News Radio podcast. Well, Scotty's host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And today, on today's episode, guys, we're going to talk about three different things, really. One, we're going to kind of just riff about this Mike Babcock to Columbus rumor. That's like one of those rumors that's like all but official. Because I honestly thought he was toast in the NHL, and we'll talk about that. But then also, we're going to talk about the two Vegas goaltenders that are going to, well, there's three Vegas goaltenders that are going to be UFAs, but the two that are relevant to the conversation of filling a need for the Detroit Red Wings. And that 10 years ago, yes. Not in 2023. But Adin Hill is one of them, and obviously he's been a big name, had a huge paddle save. He's been phenomenal for Vegas. Second best goal saved above expected next to Sergei Bobrovsky in the playoffs. And then the other one is Laurent Brossoit is apparently how it is pronounced. I thought it was Brossoit. No, Brossoit.
You don't even know how you
I can't even remember how I was pronouncing it now. You got me all twisted because Scotty was trying to coach me on how to pronounce it.
The hockey reference phonetic pronunciation is Laurent Brossoit.
Laurent Brossoit.
There you go. You keep trying to throw in a W in there.
I know, because that's how my brain wants to pronounce it. So I'm going to try my best to pronounce his name properly, as everyone deserves to have their name pronounced correctly. But no promises on that one because I'm not very good with French pronunciations. Anyway, Scotty, do you want to lead off with this Mike Babcock stuff and then get into the free agent speculation in segment 2 and 3?
Yeah, I'm just pretty fascinated with this whole thing. It's like you said, it's not official yet, and they can't sign him until his current deal with TSN is like over, like his current whatever deal is done. I think there's a month.
Yeah, still. I think he's also technically under contract with Toronto. Like his contract, he got fired, but he's still getting paid, so he can't technically move on until that's gone.
He's got to. They have to wait until his current contract (S) are over, and that's I think they said there was still like a month until that would be the case, and that would actually be eligible and allowed to sign him. But it's just fascinating to me because, like you said in the beginning, we were talking about it off air before. Like, this is a guy that I genuinely was 100% convinced would never coach at the NHL level ever again. Like, if you would have told me at any point, if you would have told me 2 days ago that Mike Babcock would ever coach in the NHL again, I would have thought you were lying. I wouldn't have believed you at all. So just knowing that is not only a possibility, but seems to be something that the Columbus Blue Jackets like genuinely want is fascinating to me. And not to say that he hasn't had a ton of success in his coaching career. Obviously he has, but just with like the way he went out and everything and with the, I don't know, attention, I guess, more to like mental health just in like society than there was even, 5, 6, 7 years ago when he coached. It's wild to me for all the reasons that were cited about like the ugly kind of things that happened behind closed doors or the way that he went out in his last 2 stops. It's fascinating to me that a team is like, especially a bad one, is like, we want that on our hand. I don't know. Well, it's really crazy to me.
In terms of the bad one comment you made there, Columbus is very much realizing, I think, that they kind of have to try and go for it because this core that they have is, I mean, they have Johnny Gaudreau for like 9 years and $9 million. I think the max is like 8 years. So 8 years and $9 million. And you have the situation where you're not good enough to compete, but you just sold your fan base on competing. So you can't really you have a win now coach now, and you're going to try and win now. It's the wrong decision to make, if you ask me, because that team's nowhere near competitive level. But here we stand. And they're getting Mike Babcock. But yeah, like you were saying, I was surprised. And I was I'm surprised and I'm not surprised. I'm surprised because I did think he was genuinely toast, not because of like the way he went out. I mean, yes, part of the reason why is because of the way he went out, but because of the fact that when he went out, he went to like coach minor league hockey and not like good, junior hockey, like minor junior hockey, not like WHL or OHL, like was lower level. And I was like, oh, this guy's he's toast in the NHL. But I'm not surprised because we've seen this time and time again. I mean, we're looking at a situation where Quenneville's probably going to get reinstated, and we see it in sports all the time. You can be a horrible person, and you might be out of the league for like a year or two, but in the end, there's not going to be any consequences. We saw it with the Chicago Blackhawks, right? I mean, with all the controversy that just happened and all the people who were suspended from the league and whatnot, literally all those consequences are about to be erased in this coming offseason. The Chicago Blackhawks didn't have to give up any picks or anything. They were fined, but they made up that money back once they won the draft lottery and season ticket renewals because you get Connor Bedard and they had a rush of season ticket renewals. It's a situation where like I'm surprised because he genuinely seemed like he was toast. When you go back to coaching that level of hockey, it's like, okay, well, now he's just looking for anything. But at the same time, I'm just not surprised because we see this all the time. I mean, how many times did, not to get too far away from hockey, but how many chances did a guy like Antonio Brown get in the NFL time and time again, where he clearly had his own issues that he needed to work through, but teams kept giving him a chance because he was talent. In the end, and it's sad, but this is the truth, in the end, talent trumps all in professional sports. It shouldn't be that way, but unfortunately it is. And if they think that Mike Babcock, who coached the 2008 Stanley Cup championship team, and that Mike Babcock, who took over a good Toronto Maple Leafs team, still has it in him to, and I think coach the 2003 Anaheim Ducks to a Stanley Cup final. I think it was that team he also had. So like he's got success in him, but it's been a long time. And it feels like a weird guy for Columbus to go after. I mean, you're going after pedigree in air quotes, I guess, because he saw that success, but it just feels like a really off the wall, out of pocket move to make for a head coach when there are other coaches available that have been in the league more recently.
Yeah. And like, obviously neither of us know him personally, and like we're in those rooms where like all that stuff happened, and certainly like not trying to compare like like I'm not trying to compare Mike Babcock to Antonio Brown or anything the Blackhawks did, but like
my point was that like we see guys get second, third, fourth chances all the time. I wasn't trying to compare it. All those situations are very different.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But you're right in the sense that it's just like it's one of those things where stuff, I don't know, like time not heals, but like time forgets all. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if enough time passes, like you'll even on a purely like not gamesmanship, but like an on the field thing, like in baseball, AJ Hinch and Alex Cora both were done for a year. And then the Red Sox literally hired Cora back, and obviously Hinch is here. Like, there's so many instances and situations like that where somebody goes out on really bad terms, and then whatever, a year, 2 years, maybe 3, 4, 5 years goes by, and then look at that, we're right back in it, kind of thing. So I don't know as far as like what to expect. I don't think the greatest coach in the history of the world is gonna take this current iteration of the Columbus Blue Jackets to anything close to the postseason, but there's a long offseason to go, I guess. So we'll see what Columbus has up their sleeve. But certainly was surprising news, to say the least.
Yeah.
Like that was
Babcock?
Right. Yeah, that was one of those things where like you see it, and I did a double take. I was like, there's no way this is real.
It's very real.
Yeah, right. And now, like, here we are talking about how it's weird that he's going to be back behind a bench somewhere. It's a weird feeling, and obviously, again, brought tons of brought a lot of success to the city of Detroit in his tenure. So definitely a weird thing that relates to us.
You just hope that because he's going to get this job, you hope that he learned from what happened and what led up to his firing. There were multiple facets. Also, like the fact that he was benching Mitch Marner and like putting him on second line and not giving that. Like he was
so many situations. There's so many stories.
Besides the mental health abuse allegations that came out against him, like even just his coaching technique, and we saw it near the end of his tenure with Detroit. he like the benching of Mike Modano, so it prevented him from getting to 1,000 games, I think it was. Just like all the weird stuff he would do, his love for veterans and making it so young guys never got significant minutes.
Yep.
Like, and then just go to Toronto with it. I mean, you saw as much heat as Toronto's getting now. Once they fired Babcock midseason and Sheldon Keefe took over, that team transformed into a regular season juggernaut because Keefe was like, yeah, I'm going to give the best players the best minutes. Like, and he was just so in love with veterans, and he kind of has this thing against young guys. So I'm not really sure how it's going to gel with an ego like Patrick Laine and a guy like Johnny Gaudreau in Columbus. So like even outside of all the controversy, if you take the controversy part out of it, when you take into account the coaching aspect of how it ended with Toronto, you're like, I don't know if this is the right guy. He seems kind of an old head, you know?
Certainly. It's gonna be something to keep tabs on and keep an eye on for sure. No, I'm very fascinated with. And again, they still have like a month, I think, until like this even becomes real or like actually happens. So we'll see. I'm sure there'll be a lot of talk from now to then, and if it does happen, it's going to be a heck of a spectacle. That's for sure.
And I just hope that if he does get hired, if that is true, that he has taken some lessons from how it ended, some treat his players better, allegedly, as if those things were true.
Yeah, right. Obviously, we're not in the room there, but a lot of stuff was said. That's for sure.
Yep. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about two upcoming free agent goalies, both of the Stanley Cup final team, Vegas Golden Knights. So stay tuned to Lockdown Red Wings. But first, got to talk to you guys today about eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Motors, guaranteed fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, do you want to talk about Laurent Brossoit or Adin Hill, or do you think that those conversations are kind of combined into one?
Yeah, I think we can kind of just have one conversation about it. We can obviously talk, one versus the other and their numbers and what to expect and whatnot. But part of me just wants to hear you say Brossoit over and
Brossoit.
over
Brossoit. Laurent Brossoit.
There you go.
I got it.
I guess we could start with Adin Hill because I think that's probably the bigger name here. But yeah, both of them are becoming UFAs. Again, as we said in the beginning, technically 3 of their 4 goalies this year are becoming UFAs because Jonathan Quick will be a UFA too. But
they've had 5 goalies start.
Yeah, right. They had a kid start 3 or 4 games as well. But yeah, so Jonathan Quick becoming a UFA, I don't think that's much of a conversation. We can just kind of get that out of the way now. Like, I don't really think there's a fit here. That we're looking for like a solidified, again, like Brian said, 10 years ago. Oh yeah, like all over it. But I think in 2023, 2024, that's probably a tough sell when you need like somebody who you can rely on for like a decent amount of games. Like there's no, we don't have anybody in this organization currently that's going to get 55, 60 games in net. So yeah, Jonathan Quick kind of out of the question. Adin Hill, I think is a really fascinating one. They have Logan Thompson too, but he's under contract for 2 more years. I think either of these guys should, either or both of these guys should get a look. I think if you're picking one, Adin Hill is probably the one that you are leaning towards.
Yeah,
I think that's probably pretty safe to say. Like if you had to cherry pick one goalie from this team that's going to be a UFA, it's probably him. But yeah, like he had a decent year and again has shown that he can carry, I guess, somewhat of a workload. I would imagine his games played would go up with us in his first year with us if we were to bring him in. But that's not one that scares me at all.
Yeah. So my only hesitation with Adin Hill is I think you're looking at, he's been phenomenal all playoffs.
Yeah,
I think behind Jack Eichel, if Vegas were to win, he'd be like 2 behind Jack Eichel for Conn Smythe. Jack Eichel's been next level. Despite a guy having a goal drought, he's been fantastic. But my hesitation with Adin Hill is because of how quickly the reputation he had changed. I remember when he was traded from the Sharks to Vegas, everyone was like, Adin Hill, really? He's going to be your solution in net? Like, you need an actual goalie because he's been just okay with other teams in the across the NHL. Like, he had pretty good numbers with Arizona Coyotes. He had decent numbers with the San Jose Sharks. But then he goes to Vegas, and in 27 games played in the regular season, he had a .915 save percentage. His goals saved above expected this season was 7.54. And in the playoffs, he's been even next level. So it went from like this guy is like a, 1B or maybe a 1A in most things to like he's just been a bona fide stud. I mean, a goal saved above expected in the playoffs, 11.17, is only second only to Sergei Bobrovsky in the playoffs. He's been unreal. And my worry about that is, are we looking at like another Ville Husso type situation where you get a youngish goalie who hasn't had a ton of workload? And like we're not necessarily, and here's two, what are the Red Wings looking for? Are they looking for a guy to be a 1A, or is Ville Husso still a 1A and you're just looking for somebody to be the second part of that backup, or you're looking for like a backup? That's the other question too. What is Adin Hill in your system?
Well, right, exactly. And I think that it's tough because he, like you said, he's had a really good postseason and he's shown that he can be a backup at the NHL level for sure. But it's one of those weird things where if you are going to have to, like I said, you're going to have to ask more games played from him, right? Like his games played would certainly, at least regular season wise, would certainly spike a little bit. I think he played in like 28 or
27 regular season.
Yeah, so you're going to need some more games out of him for sure than that, and just I think the Wings may be looking for someone who is more solidified, dare I say? Like, is that, I don't know if that's the right word or not.
No, I think you're right.
Someone who's more like, hey, we the last 2 goalies we've had have been not flyers, but like we've given them promotions when they came here, and they've had bigger roles coming here than they had with their organizations. Now we need someone who we can just put in that whatever it ends up being, 38 to 48 times next year, and just completely trust and they have a proven track record of putting up good numbers in that amount of time, type of thing.
And the nice thing about Adin Hill, though, versus Ville Husso is he's done it in the playoffs. That was the big not complaint, but the little criticism that people had for Ville Husso is he was great last year or the year before with St. Louis, but when it came time for the playoffs, he kind of fell off. Adin Hill didn't do that. In fact, instead, he stepped up to the plate. And I think with the amount of money he's making, which his contract is expiring at 2.175, I mean, he's going to be looking for, and he is going to get a pay raise. But that's not an issue for the Red Wings. Like, if you end up giving him something similar to what Ville Husso is making right now, which is $4.75 million, I think that's perfectly reasonable. In fact, maybe a little bit more, given the fact that he's been phenomenal in the playoffs. He'll probably get a little bit more money, but like that's fine. If it's to another short-term contract, like with like they did with Ville Husso, it was what, 3 years for 4.75. If you can get a goalie for that, because it's really rare that goalies get long-term contracts. You don't see Sergei Bobrovsky contracts handed out very much because it's generally considered that long-term UFA contracts for goalies are a bad move. If you can get him on a shorter contract and he can serve as that 1B or maybe even that 1A to Ville Husso, like just another guy to help kind of build that bridge to hopefully when Sebastian Cossa is ready. But again, my one big concern is the workload. He's had good numbers in pretty much every year he's played, but this in every year he's played, it's been 27 or less games played. If he's coming to Detroit, like you said, it's going to be a promotion. And I'm just going to be worried that he's playing in a good system. He's not playing a lot of games. And that's why his numbers might be a little bit elevated. But again, the counter argument to that is he's showed up in the playoffs when it's mattered most. So I'm all for it. The Red Wings desperately need it. And he's one of the prime candidates right now because of what he's doing in the playoffs. But we've been almost, I wouldn't say burned with Ville Husso, but it feels like we've been almost as if we've been burned in 2 back-to-back years, taking, as you put it, like flyers on a goalie who we're looking to break out and have a bigger role. I'm almost hesitant to do it for a third year, but what choice do the Red Wings have? They need a backup goalie. They need a 1B at the very least. And Adin Hill's the best of the bunch. And I don't want to sign a 35-year-old goalie. I want an actual goalie who's shown that they can do it. And Adin Hill is the closest thing to that. So even with my hesitations in the back of my mind, there's no better option right now, in my opinion, than Adin Hill on the free agent market.
I agree.
Cool. When we come back, we'll talk about Laurent Brossoit. So stay tuned. The Lockdown Red Wings. I got it, man. I'm crushing it. Segment 3, Lockdown Red Wings podcast. It's funny, Scotty. We were like, we're going to talk about them at the same time. And then we talked about just Adin Hill.
Right, yeah. That's how
so let's talk about the other goalie. Well, the other goalie, because there's 5 in this organization. But the other goalie that played in the playoffs this year, Laurent Brossoit.
There you go.
Crushing it. It's funny is halfway through my spiel about being worried in the back of my mind about Adin Hill. Brossoit, it mirrors more the Adin Hill situation or the Ville Husso situation than Adin Hill does, because Brossoit started in the playoffs and then fell off, and then Adin Hill took over and was phenomenal. Like that play style, if you look at his numbers, he only played 11 games in the regular season, but .927 save percentage in that span, got the trust of the organization to start 8 playoff games or playing 8 playoff games, but it had 8.94. Like that is even more of the Ville Husso situation than Adin Hill was. The only difference is that Brossoit is 30 instead of 25.
Right.
But that's not really, when you're looking for a backup goalie or a 1B, 30 years old, especially for goaltending, isn't that big of a deal.
Yeah, well, especially, we really, I mean, you said it earlier, we have to answer the question of what we are looking for in a goaltender. Whatever, it's guaranteed we're bringing in somebody. They're not just going to that's 100%. I can promise you today on June 5th the Detroit Red Wings will bring in someone that plays goalie. So it's just a matter of what they are really looking for out of that. I think bringing in somebody who's 30, if they're good enough, I don't think there's a problem in that at all. He is shares the workload for the next couple of years, and then hopefully whoever you bring in can kind of do a passing of the torch thing to Sebastian Cossa. I think that is the goal within the organization, but you have a while until that is going to appear. That's not like a this year or even next year thing. That's not like a right around the corner type of situation. So I think, I'm not necessarily sure I want to bring in somebody who's 35 or 36, but 30 certainly doesn't scare me.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, go ahead, finish.
No. That was pretty much it. He had a really solid year this year. It was just in a very, very small sample size. That's all.
And that's the big thing. You go back to that conversation. Here's the real difference in why you would sign Hill versus why you would sign a Brossoit. It all depends on what the Red Wings are looking for. If you're looking for a bona fide tandem in the NHL, like a 1A and 1B, you go after a guy like Adin Hill.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for an actual backup and you don't want to spend a lot of money, but you want somebody who in that span of only 11 games looked pretty good with the Vegas Golden Knights, you go out there and you get a Brossoit. Brossoit's a good fit for the Red Wings if you want an actual backup because you think Ville Husso is your starter for the next 2 years. You can get Brossoit for 2 years, maybe 3 years, maybe even 1 year. You get him for short term. You don't pay him nearly as much. His contract right now, that's expiring, he's getting paid $2.325. He might get a little bit of a pay raise, but it's not going to break the bank at the NHL level. And you're going to get him on a shorter term than probably an Adin Hill. You just have to understand then that he is your backup. And Ville
Yeah.
Husso, you're committed to being your starter for the next 2 years. And I'm okay with that idea. I still believe Ville Husso can be the solution. I think a lot of what happened with Ville Husso near the end of that season was injury and workload. Obviously, we knew he was hurt, but he had never played in that many games before. He's a fundamentally sound goalie. He's got a little, I think his gloves are a little weak, but like that's all things that can be tweaked and fixed upon. And as his team gets better, his workload in that night to night is going to get easier as well. So I think Ville Husso can still be the solution, at least for the next 2 years or 3 years or however long they decide to keep him until Sebastian Cossa is hopefully ready for the NHL level. So it really just comes down to that question: is what do the Red Wings need? What is Steve Yzerman thinking? If he wants a tandem, go get Adin Hill. You have your $8 million under the cap floor. You can spend a little bit of money on having a tandem. If you think Ville Husso is your starter, go get Brossoit. Now, because Brossoit, goal saved above expected in the regular season, was a positive. Now, I spoke a little bit about in segment 2 about how or at the beginning of this segment rather, about how in the playoffs he kind of fell off like Ville Husso did. But that doesn't really matter to the Detroit Red Wings, who aren't making the playoffs. Like that's one of those problems you worry about if you get there. Like the Red Wings are right now in a category where you're just trying to make the postseason.
Yeah.
So don't worry about who is and isn't a playoff performer when you're not even in that conversation. So if Brossoit, and again, granted, in his limited 11 games played, put up a 6.52 goal saved above expected, I mean, he's looking like a pretty solid option for backup goalie right now. And I wouldn't stub my nose at any option available. I think both these Vegas Golden Knights, pending UFAs, are good options for different reasons. And the Vegas Golden Knights are going to have to make a decision here because they still have Logan Thompson on the books. So you're not going to, either Adin Hill or Brossoit is going to walk away from this organization because they are cap strapped, like up against it going into free agency. So one of these two guys is going to hit the free agent market. And whichever one it is, I think you can make an argument for pursuing both of them.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that at all. I think the biggest point really that I agree with that you said in there was they both make sense for different reasons. Like both have a fit with this team, but for different reasons. One being more of a closer to a 50-50 split, where the other would be like, okay, we're trusting Husso to be our starter going forward. And I think that's a really good point because that's the question, like with this entire goalie market. And we'll talk about, it a lot more, obviously, over the next month. We'll talk about available free agents and whatnot, but it's just one of those things where you really have to lay out and define what you are looking for out of the goalie position, out of the goalie rather, that you bring in. Like you have to make that decision. Is it Husso is the starter? Because that's a much, honestly, I would say, wider market you cast for yourself if you're just looking for a quote unquote true backup. But if you want more of a split, that narrows your market, and you have to start looking at better and more expensive talent. So it's going to be really interesting to see, and I guess I would lean more toward the split just because I would like to say guarantee us a better goalie that we'd be bringing in, but B, just with like how much of, like we've seen this movie before, we've been hurt like this before, and I like Husso, and I don't think this is going to happen, but like we have to remember expectations for Ned going into just this season and how much they were completely thrown out the window by literally like American Thanksgiving. So like it's one of those things where I think for depth purposes, more so even than like your trust or lack of trust in Husso, you need to go out and sign somebody who's a solidified and you can trust, close to 42 times a year.
Yeah, and there's a ton of other goalies, too, that we can talk about. Like, we're going to talk about probably Jeremy Swayman, but that's more of a trade situation. But there's other free agent goalies as well. But we just thought it would be pertinent to talk about both of the Vegas Golden Knights goalies in one conversation. So, like, when we're talking about pursuing these guys, we're not trying to make it sound as if these are the only options.
Yeah,
in fact,
no. We're just,
In a situation where you're looking for a backup goaltending, the free agent market's actually not so bad. And that's that one regard this offseason. There's actually going to be quite a few goalies that are going to hit the free agent market that had pretty solid numbers this season. But you got to remember, too, you're not the only team that's going to be chasing after them. So there's a couple different routes Red Wings can take to addressing that backup goaltending situation. And it definitely is out. There's a scope wider than just the Vegas Golden Knights. But these are the two goalies that we decided to talk about in this episode. But I do stand by thinking that right now, Adin Hill might be your best bet on the free agent market, if you decide to address it via free agency, which Yzerman hasn't done yet. He's traded for both his goalies. Adin Hill might be the best one given his track record, but he's also going to be the one you probably are going to have to pay for the most out of a lot of the other free agents, given what he's doing in the playoffs.
Be up there for sure.
Anyway, Scotty, any final thoughts?
How does it feel being an engaged man?
Pretty good. Pretty good. I'm more proud of myself because, like I was telling you, it was I actually managed to surprise her with
that is impressive, man. That's a tall task.
Yeah, because she's a lot smarter than me. So I just thought that she would figure it out, and she didn't. In fact, at one point after we were talking about it, she was like, "Oh yeah, if you didn't propose, I'd been really mad." And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, glad I decided to do it today."
Well, I'm glad everything went smoothly.
Yeah,
I'm happy for you.
Thank you, man. I'm happy too.
Yeah, I think that's about it. We ball.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. To your team every day.
Every day.